Moms and dads, do you wish you could know where your kids' shoes are at all times? Now you can with Skechers' newest Apple AirTag compatible sneakers, Find My Skechers. There's a clever hidden AirTag compartment under the shoe's insole. It's sleek, secure, and your child can't feel or see it. Then you can check where your kids' shoes are on the Find My app. Plus, they're available for boys and girls. Get Find My Skechers at Skechers.com, a Skechers store near you, or wherever kids' shoes are sold. Apple AirTags sold separately.
Lowe's has the Labor Day deals you need to give your home a new look. Buy one, get one free select interior paint via Visa gift card rebate. Then, add the final touch with 2 for $8 on select 2.5 or 3-quart mums. Refresh your home and save big while doing it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 9/3. Mums offer in-store only. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. More terms and restrictions apply. See Lowes.com/rebates for details.
A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you, as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by a man that joined me on the podcast yesterday, Rob Donaldson. He does such an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're going to be asking him just about a wide variety of things, because I have found the last few years in college basketball, it's easier to be able to find teams I want to fade earlier in the season rather than teams I want to back. So I'm going to be touching upon that very topic. We're going to take a look at some of these teams that we do want to be betting on early on in the season, some of the teams that we may not want to be betting on early on during the season, what makes up just a good team in general that is worthy of backing early on the season. I'm going to be bringing up teams that are built a little bit more around big men. And things are going to drive into taking a big look at the SEC. Some of the teams that we're feeling bullish on the SEC, some of the teams that we're feeling a little bit more bearish on in the SEC as well, which teams are a little bit more / less trustworthy as well. So we're going to have a great chat with Rob. We always do. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter / X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to the funds that they oh so desire whenever and wherever, and that 100% of gambling transactions do get approved. When you go to edgeboost.bet, make sure you put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That's going to get you a $1 for $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now I'll chat with our good friend Rob. He does such an amazing job on this front, and this time of year, he's doing a good job of being able to evaluate the great game of baseball day to day. You're able to view all of his videos and all of his picks and analysis over at youtube.com/Rob Donaldson and on his Twitter / X feed at RobDFB. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And back-to-back days that we've been talking college basketball together, man. That's how you know it's getting real and real and real. We're already hitting college football season, and obviously those two overlap as well. So I'm excited to be talking about it again here with you.
Oh, absolutely. It is the best time of year when we've got all these college sports in our lives. We've got college basketball coming up as well. And when it comes to the month of September, because now we're starting to get a little bit close, what sort of stage are you with regards to your research in the off season? Is this the time of year where you're starting to be able to put a little bit more numbers / bet / fade, shall we say, tags to teams, or is it still a little bit more hunting and gathering and trying to decipher how the pieces are going to fit together?
I've got a pretty good semblance of who, my quote unquote teams that I'm going to be backing in terms of bets and also fading in terms of bets are probably going to be going into this new season. Now, there are a bunch of teams with like asterisks that I put next to them in my list when you're talking about some of these kind of low majors or mid major type of leagues where they have a lot of questions, but that kind of unknown upside aspect to their program as well. And it's just a matter of kind of watching those teams through the first, few games, maybe even few weeks, or maybe even the first month as well. But I've definitely got a good idea on who I like in the landscape of college basketball. And I'm just excited for the games to actually show up here for us.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a big question that I have for you, because with regards to teams that we like to fade, I think that both of us have relatively a similar process. Some of these teams that maybe overperformed in March last year, these teams that they've got 100 different billion transfers and they have absolutely nothing returning from last year whatsoever. You're trying to build chemistry on the fly. Typically, that's not the world's greatest thing. But in terms of the teams that you're looking to back, what are some of the things that you're looking at there? Because I feel like it's actually easier in this day and age to have fade teams rather than teams that you're willing to trust early on because of so much movement.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing that I'm really starting to pick up with college basketball is not every mid-major, not every low major is built the same in terms of the formula, in terms of the recruiting ground, in terms of that attractiveness of acquiring talent, not only from just the up transfers from Division II, or the lateral guys who stay within the same conference at that low level and then just go somewhere else in that same tier, but also the ones that attract the down transfers from some really prominent schools. When you're kind of narrowing it on that space, you start to realize that, yes, some of these, programs are in a really good spot with NIL and the transfer portal. They're getting this talent that they've never would have been able to accumulate had this not been kind of the building block of that process in years past. But you're also seeing some of these teams as well who are really seeing the nasty side of NIL and the transfer portal, who might be getting phased out in terms of their own kind of smaller league. And those are the teams that I think I'm starting to actually dial in on, maybe putting an asterisk next to or just outright fading.
Yeah, but I think that it's so interesting to take a look at some of these leagues as well, because we just did the Southland Conference Preview podcast on my show yesterday. And how do you take a look at some of these teams in a conference where there's a distinct style? Like in the Southland, it's generating a bunch of turnovers. For the Big Ten for the longest of time, obviously, it's a little bit different now that those West Coast teams come in. It was all about running things through the big men, playing basketball like it's 1985 once again. How do you take a look at some of these teams that try to zag while everyone else is zigging? Because I think that these are teams that they either shoot for the stars, they're either really, really good, and because they go against the grain, they are rewarded, or because they go against the grain, it goes completely awful, and they don't really give you a lot of production. Like I also did my Sunbelt Conference preview a few days ago, a team like South Alabama that dares you to shoot threes. That I actually think is a really good formula to win in the Sunbelt. Meanwhile, if they are in non-conference play, they're facing off against a team that's really good from three, they're going to become a total fade.
It's a really great question, because when you are looking at, say, like the makeup of the A10, I find it so fascinating because in years past, more so about 5 years kind of being the barrier line of what I'm drawing in the sand, it was a more sort of slower tempo, balanced style sort of league. And then all of a sudden, a lot of programs started zigging. You saw Duquesne come in there. You saw Richmond really rise to the surface. Davidson was launching up shots. And all of a sudden, it became like this whole different, container of high-tempo teams, good defensive teams, and now it almost kind of feels like when you look at just the stylistic approach of the A10, a conference that I think is kind of a budding, high major in terms of the talent that they produce. My goodness, now you're seeing slower paces, higher defensive styles, offensive styles, all kind of clashing with one another, and there hasn't really been a clear, hierarchy in terms of which styles are going to prevail. And I think in every single league right now, especially with the analytical data that is really emerging out there, we're starting to see it in the more of the kind of mid-major leagues and the low major leagues as well, where a lot of different ADs are taking stabs at coaches with a distinct style to kind of shake up the conference. And yeah, that's 100% part of the handicap when you're looking at the long-term trajectory here in the offseason.
Yep, absolutely. And looking at these teams and their distinct styles is oh so significant. And I do think that's oh so interesting, as we do have our good friend and Mr. Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, and his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I don't know if you find yourself doing this a little bit towards the beginning part of the season as well, but I feel like guard play can sometimes be a little bit suspect. So if you have like a returning point guard or something like that, I'm very much willing to buy in on a team. But I just find myself trusting in teams a little bit more with regards to good low post play as well, because how guards fit in with one another, I feel like it's a little bit different with big men. When you've got transfers that come in as like 6'10" shot blockers, I feel like they can fit into a system very, very easily. Whereas as like a guard that takes 15 shots a game, you don't know how they're going to be able to fit in as well. And that's something that I look at towards the beginning part of the season, trusting in these teams that if they do have quite a few transfers, them having, shall we say, big-time big men coming in down low rather than a whole bunch of new guards.
Yeah, because listen, guards are a fun, addition to your team in the offseason, right? If you're a fan of one of these teams that brings in that exciting guard, maybe like the Max Asmus of years past or somebody to that kind of degree, you're excited. You're like, oh my gosh, we got a scorer. We have an athletic guy. We have, somebody who could really change the whole look of this program. But there are so many of them. And so pairing them with the right guys, finding the right personalities to gel with who you already have in-house is oh so important. And, we've kind of, at least I brought it up with Kansas State on your podcast throughout the entire offseason, but they're kind of one of the poster boys of you can't just add the pure talent and hope that everybody just gets along and everybody gels on the court and it's a whole perfect cohesion of offensive basketball, because that's not always going to be the case. And I think the coaches that are really starting to mastermind that and really know where to pick their spots with recruiting are really coming out ahead from the talent accumulation standpoint, because it's not about just acquiring a bunch of former 5-stars or talented guys that average 20 points per game. It's about finding guys who can fit roles, and that's kind of an NBA formula. That's what's really working, I think, in the college basketball ranks right now as well, with NIL, with the transfer portal, and some coaches 100% do it better than others.
No question about it. I actually like what Kansas has done here in the offseason, because they don't have as much splash. You're not going to have a Hunter Dickinson. You do have a guy by the last name Peterson, who many people think is going to go in the top 5 in the draft, which I always love, but at the same time, they are bringing in a little bit more, shall we say, stake. They're bringing in these guys from the Atlantic 10 with bringing a guy like Jaden Dawson. I really think that they've done a good job here. And how do you take a look at some of these teams that might be flying a little bit under the radar, but it feels like they just brought in relatively good fits in general? I also take a look at a team like in Oklahoma, bringing in Xavier Brown from the Atlantic 10, bringing in a guy like a Tay Davis. Nigel Pack is obviously a big name, but I think that he actually will fit in quite well. And that's a team I actually feel relatively bullish about in the SEC, though I do need to see a little bit more from them down low.
Yeah, no, you mentioned one of the teams that I think is a true kind of, I guess, textbook sleeper. And we kind of saw this with Missouri last season, with Vanderbilt last season, but a transfer portal class, a coach kind of going into a really big prove-it year can sometimes be a massive sort of building block for the program. And Oklahoma, with a guy like Xavier Brown, he's one of those dudes that has already played with NBA talent and really top-end talent, was at St. Joseph's. Obviously Rasheer Fleming, but Eric Reynolds was there alongside him, another really good scoring guard, and they blended so well on the court. He really kind of grew up in that system, and it was unfortunate, for whatever reason, that team didn't go far, but it wasn't Xavier Brown's fault. He was continuing to produce. And when you are looking at Oklahoma, Nigel Pack, very similar in terms of, a lot of talent around him over the course of his career at multiple different stops, and he's shown that really good success over time. And I really do feel like if Oklahoma is going to have that sort of breakout year, not just kind of make the NCAA tournament based on the bubble, but really have a nice emergent season, it's going to be this season. And call me a believer, but I maybe I'm falling into a trap, but I kind of want to believe in Oklahoma from what I'm seeing.
I am as well, and I do have a few question marks down low, but I feel like Muhammad Wagyu coming on over after he spent some time at Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. He also was at North Carolina. That's a guy that I think has a little bit of upside as well, so I'm feeling relatively bullish about them. And I do want to flesh this out a little bit more on the flip side, because I do think that with the SEC, there's a lot of teams in the middle that I could really see ascending in. I don't know if there's really those top teams in the SEC like we saw last year. Certainly Florida is going to be rock solid, but are they going to be as rock solid as last year? What are a few teams that might decline, and what are a few teams that might surprise in the SEC? We'll touch upon this and so much more with Rob on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast.
Lowe's knows you've got a job to do, and we help get it done. With the MyLowe's Pro Rewards program, eligible members save more with volume discounts on qualifying orders through a quote of $2,000 or more. Join for free today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Offer can't be combined with any other discount, contract, and/or special pricing. Exclusions, more terms, and restrictions apply. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. You're able to follow it all on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB or on his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. And we were talking about it just before we hit a break about the SEC and how some of these middle teams might be able to surprise. They've got a lot of teams with characteristics that we just listed off. With Florida, they're going to be turning over a lot of their backcourt, but they do return pretty much the entirety of their low post play, and I don't think that they're going to go back-to-back with regards to their titles, but I do think that they're a rock-solid team. But I am very curious about some of these teams like an Auburn, who they bring back one main guard, but we don't know the DUI situation with regards to Todd Pettiford. They're bringing Keyshawn Hall. That's a team that I think could take a little bit of a fall off, while a team that I just absolutely love is Vanderbilt, because I feel like this team bringing in Jalen Washington, that's exactly what they needed down low. They bring back a guy like a Tyler Nickel from a season ago. I love Frankie Collins, Mike James, the fifth for this Vanderbilt team, and that's a team that I feel like is a true sleeper out there in the SEC as well, that I really think could, when it's all said and done, be like a top four team.
It honestly wouldn't surprise me, and when you are looking at the SEC, my goodness, man, this is a conference.
They might get 12 teams into the NCAA tournament again.
They might just get everybody into the field. Who knows? I don't think it's even
Sorry, South Carolina, maybe not them.
Yeah, maybe not South Carolina, maybe not LSU either. We potentially can leave them off the list, I suppose. But, you know, there's a team in Mississippi, and whether or not you want to pick Mississippi State or Ole Miss, I think both are really viable to have a breakout kind of season. Chris Jans, I've been really waiting on it. I haven't really seen it yet, even though he's had some really fantastic starts. It's about going from a great start to a great finish. But Chris Beard and Ole Miss, man, did they take a step up last season in a massive way. And I do feel like if you want to bank on, again, the coaches that have done it at multiple stops and have shown the ability to kind of not only just acquire talent, but make it look presentable on the court, he is one of the best, I think, in this business right now in terms of doing that. So if you want to take a long shot in the SEC, I wouldn't look further past Ole Miss, for me personally.
Now, I don't think that this team is going to finish much above, like, say, the middle of the SEC, like maybe 8th or 9th, but I think that there could be a lot of early season value on this team once again. And I'm talking about Georgia, because I look at Mike White, and I feel like a lot of people are still holding over his head the fact that he was not great at Florida. And I think even Mike White would admit that he was not great at Florida, but he feels like another one of those guys that we talk about it. Sometimes when you bring in the big names, sometimes when you bring in the splash, because he had so many resources at Florida, they just don't necessarily fit together. Meanwhile, at Georgia, he brought in the Mount St. Mary's backcourt from a season ago. They were able to ascend there. Here in the offseason, he brings in guys like a Marcus Millender, Jeremiah Wilkerson from Cal. Not necessarily guys that really capture your attention. Cannon Catchings is a former top 50 recruit, but really didn't see a ton of run over at BYU. And I feel like he's just done a great job of being able to bring in good fits. And even though on paper, a lot of people project Georgia lowly, I don't know if they're going to be able to win some of those step-up top 25 games, but I feel very confident in Mike White doing just enough for his team to be able to hold in there and cover a lot of spreads.
Yeah, and they competed with the top of this league last year in a number of different spots. I mean, they had Florida on the ropes when Florida was kind of a team that was just running through the conference, and now they're retaining, you know, a good percentage of the minutes that they had last season relative to the league, and they are acquiring talent as well, but I think it's the right kind of talent. I'm 100% with you. That's kind of why I said outside of LSU and South Carolina, don't be surprised if this entire league just kind of filters into the conversation of making the NCAA tournament, because Georgia, as one of the quote-unquote sort of bottom-looking teams last season, that is, I feel like they're going to have a really major resurgence and have a good chance to be in that conversation somewhere in the middle, to your point. And my goodness, I get it. Mike White wasn't really maybe the big time get after Billy Donovan at Florida, but he did win a lot of games, and he's already kind of seen an improvement with his Georgia program as well. So why not bet on a guy who's seeing that constant year-over-year improvement? I just think the upwards trajectory is what you want to bank on, especially in the era of a lot of roster turnover.
Yep, I'm right there with you. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does such great work over at the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this has become very much an SEC conversation, which I do love because, well, they got so many teams in the NCAA tournament, and we're mentioning some of these teams towards like the bottom/middle that we're feeling bullish on. I know you've been on this podcast before mentioning that you're bearish on Florida. Is there another team or two that comes in a little bit overrated? Because we're talking about these teams that could surprise, and if there's a team that surprises, that means that there is a team that needs to fall a little bit short. For me, I just feel like Auburn is going to take a little bit of setback, even with Pettiford coming back for them. I want to get your thoughts here, because I do think that out there in the SEC, we are going to have one or two, shall we say, thuds this year, and I think it's going to be interesting because I think that this is going to be a really tight league where a lot of these teams are right now being picked like 8th or worse are going to be a little bit more feisty than expected. And I think that we could see a few of these teams sort of be not necessarily like massive disappointments, but maybe teams that we thought would be in the top 5 instead be in the middle.
And I'm not going to even look further past Missouri because we've already kind of seen that year-over-year sort of drastic change during the Dennis Gates tenure. And it's because this team lives and dies by the portal. They are a true poster boy for what can go right and go wrong during the NIL portal era. And obviously in year 1 of Dennis Gates, it was a resounding success. They had a fantastic year. They made the NCAA tournament. And then in year 2, they failed to win a single SEC game in conference play. Obviously last year, they go back to the NCAA tournament. They get knocked off by Drake in round 1, but that was a really big team comprised of a lot of transfer talent. And now they're just kind of running it back again, hoping that everything kind of blends together. They're returning, some minutes in terms of, guys who contributed last season, but it really isn't like the whole starting lineup is there again. Even the 2 deeps aren't there for them as well. And from that side, if you're talking about an SEC that's geared up to be more and more competitive, we're talking about teams at the bottom that can potentially rise up and get near the top or get near that middle. Well, hey, somebody theoretically needs to fall down a few spots, and I do feel like Missouri is one of those teams that just immediately comes to mind for me.
Yeah, Ben, with Missouri, it was a bunch that was really, really based around their backcourt over the last few seasons. They were a little bit better in the post last season, but I do think that out there in a conference like the SEC, you need to be a little bit more well-rounded. They do bring back Mark Mitchell, which I just think is absolutely massive. And Jevin Porter, his brother Michael Porter, once played for Missouri. Welcome in there, but I'm right there with you. I feel like a guy like a Caleb Grill was just such a good piece for this team. Losing a lot of that, I do have some question marks there, as it feels like this is a completely different team from what we've seen in the past from Dennis Gates, with a lot more, shall we say, forward play rather than a lot more backcourt play. So glad that you mentioned that. And Rob, I know you're doing an incredible job of getting set for this upcoming college basketball season. You're looking at all the conferences. You were just on my podcast yesterday talking about the Southland. Now we step it up. We talk about the SEC. So you're clearly a wealth of talent in terms of all 364 Division I teams. Love the good people at home. Know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, I always love talking all 364 with you, whether we're talking about mid-majors in the Southland or the SEC or whatever else, it may be in terms of the coaching front, you have it. But man, for those who want to follow my college basketball bets once we actually get into the season with actual spreads, actual games, you can do so on Twitter/X at RobDFB and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
It is always great to be able to get Rob aboard. He does such an incredible job of taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, he lends incredible insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you guys once again tomorrow, and be on the lookout for more conference previews. We'll probably have a few days without, and then towards the end of the week, we'll get those guests up once again. So appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Did my card go through?
Oh no.
Your small business depends on its internet, so switch to Verizon Business. And you could get LTE business internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data for unlimited business.
There we go.
Get the internet you need at the price you want. Verizon Business. Starting price for LTE Business Internet, 25 megabits per second, unlimited data plan with select Verizon Business Smartphone plan savings. Terms apply.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.